Hello, everybody. Darren Cross here, MBA 652 Organizational Behavior, and this is the second presentation in Mod 5. It's for Chapter 8. And remember that we've been talking about behavior and all of those things that influence behavior, and then we thought about how behavior leads to making decisions, and then we talked about the process of creativity. Well, individual behavior in and of itself is one thing, but we have to also consider how people act and how it changes things whenever people are now in groups. And so let's talk about team dynamics. We know that inevitably when you find yourself in organizations, you are going to find yourself on a team. And so there are some things that we have to think about because things do change and we do kind of behave differently whenever we throw the team dynamic aspect into it. So what is a team? A team is two or more people that are united to fulfill a specific purpose. They count on each other, they're mutually accountable to each other, and they also feel like they're on a team, right? So if you don't feel like, if there's someone, there could be two people, they could be trying to do the same thing, they could be accountable to each other, but the reality is, unless everyone realizes they're on a team, you really kind of don't have a team. You could just have a group. The other thing to think about is that there are some dimensions or elements that kind of comprise a team or that describe a team. So let's talk about those. A team could be, when we're talking about permanence, what we're saying is, how long is this team going to last? Is this a team that's ongoing forever? Is this a team that's just together in order to accomplish some specific goal? That kind of matters because the way that you interact actually matters, and then the way that you make decisions actually matter. We'll get into that a little later. There are varying different degrees of skill levels. So when you're talking about a team, you could have people who are good at different things, and we'll talk about that as well as we talk about the types of teams that you might find. And also there's authority differentiation, which is really, the degree to which decisions are made, like at the top of that team or as a team. Is this do we vote? Do we have a unanimous? Do we have to have a unanimous vote? Do we have to have simple majority? However that works. And so that's another element of teams. Now, in addition to teams, we have groups, and I want you to understand that informal groups could exist inside of an organization as well. They don't always have to be an organization sanctioned group of people. It could be we just kind of are a group as a result of being close to each other or having things in kind. And so that exists, and those things actually influence the way that people behave as well. So we need to think about that as well. Now, the advantages of a team, first of all, we're able to make better decisions because we have diversity of thought. We have people who come from different areas and background, and so they kind of add something to the mix. If you remember back in the last chapter talking about creativity, one of the things that we were concerned about is kind of changing the dynamic and throwing extra things that we wouldn't necessarily have thought about into the mix, and that is useful to help us kind of come up with some newer ideas and some innovation. And so that's one of the things that we come up with teams. Also, it helps to get information around the organization, and it helps to increase motivation and engagement because employees who are involved in the decision making of the organization feel like they're bought in and they feel like they have some ownership. The challenges are, though, that you have process losses, which are really what is needed, the expense basically of having a team. And so if you get together and have a team that is saving the organization, I'm being as crude as possible. I'm just coming up with the simplest possible description here. If you have a team that gets together for the purpose of saving, let's say, $100,000 a year, but by virtue of all of the administrative and bureaucratic parts of trying to get this team together, you're spending $100,000. It's not worth it to do that team. So there's always cost of doing that team, and that's why you have to make sure that being a team is also effective. There's also the potential for social loafing, which is, some people who don't give everything that they can give because they know that together as a team, they're going to be able to put together a product. And so their deal is, no one's going to be able to tell that I didn't give my full effort here. Let's talk about the team effectiveness model. So let's begin with the organizational and team environment, the culture and the structure and things like that. These are things that influence how effective that team is going to be. How the team is designed, how big and small it is. We'll talk about some of these things later. What the nature of our task is, who is on our team. Also, how we actually interact and work with each other. Are we cohesive? Do we have trust? That kind of thing. Those are very, very important. And how does team effectiveness come out? What does team effectiveness really mean? Well, we accomplish our task. We actually, everyone feels like they got out of the team what we were supposed to do, and the team actually has a purpose, and people feel like it's worth it to go on. So let's talk about the team environment. So one of the things that we think about is, what is the thing that's outside of the team? It's kind of like the situational factors when we're talking about the Mars model, right? What are those things outside of the team that might influence us? Well, reward system, how they're rewarded. Are the team members rewarded as a team, or is a differentiation with regard to how different members of the team might be rewarded? That's a very tricky thing, and it's a good thing to try to figure out the balance between making sure that the team is rewarded for the goals or performance of the team itself, but that also there's a way to kind of mitigate for people who are socially loafing, and a way to compensate and understand when someone is not putting in their little piece. Also, how people communicate is important. The communication systems refer to the mechanisms that team members use to communicate back and forth, and who's allowed to have what information and that kind of thing. The structure of the organization and the team itself, who's in charge of the organization and who's in charge of the team itself. Those things comprise the environment, and also the actual physical space that we have to operate as a team. All of these things comprise the team environment, and of course they influence how well that team is going to work together. So when we're talking about all of those elements that comprise the actual team itself, right, the team processes and things like that, tasks is one of them, and the nature of the task is important as well. You need to be able to break up tasks so that people can understand what they're supposed to do on that team. You need to be able to, hopefully, the team coordinates and communicates in a way that it helps to actually communicate back and forth, right? So you need to be able to, because there are so many people relying on each other, you need to be able to understand how all of these things communicate. And so you need to make sure that each task is super structured and then everybody knows what's supposed to happen. We need to also understand that there's interdependence among these tasks. And so when tasks require interdependence, that's the best time for a team. If you don't need interdependence, or you don't depend upon other members of the team for a task, then I would question, why do you even need the team? I mean, just make the decision on your own. So those are things to take into consideration. When we're talking about interdependence, the nature of the task will drive how people are dependent upon each other, and so we have to look at these types of things. So when we have low interdependence, it's usually there's like a leader or a resource, and each of the team members get something out of that resource, and that's how the team works. Then you might have sequential interdependence, which means that C needs B to do something before they can do their thing, and B needs A to do something before they do their thing. And that's, depending upon the nature of the task and the goal of the team itself, that could be something that exists. Or you could have a reciprocal type of a thing, but I would argue that also, let's see here. Yeah, if you look, everybody is dependent upon everybody else, right? So A is dependent upon B and C, C is dependent upon B and A, and B is dependent upon A and C. So everybody is interdependent upon each other. And so this is a high level of task interdependence, and we just have to understand that's what's going on. Another thing to take into consideration, team size. Smaller teams tend to be better because they're more efficient. But we need to have enough resources and enough brain power to get the task done. So that's how much, that's the extent to which we want to increase the team, the number of the members on the team. Team compensation, team composition, how the team actually is comprised. When we're talking about all of the members of the team, we have to take into consideration the 5 C's, okay? When we have multiple members of a team, and especially when the teams get big, these are the things that we have to be good at. Cooperating, sharing resources and learning to coordinate or to accommodate others, coordinating, aligning your work, and making sure that you're not stepping on the toes of other people or kind of getting in the way of other people who are trying to do things, communicating, sharing information, the information that's supposed to be and should be shared to the people who need that information, comforting, showing empathy, providing psychological support, resolving conflict or conflict resolving to stay in line with the 5 C's, being able to understand the nature of the conflict and figuring out how to make that conflict go away or to actually use it to the benefit of the team. So the composition of the team is also vitally important. Another thing to understand is, hey, when you have diversity, that's good because that's diversity of thought. You broaden your knowledge base and you actually create the potential for better decisions and being able to effectively complete that goal better. The other thing, though, is that whenever you have diversity, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but what you want to get to is go through this process of being where you're performing. And so it takes longer to do that when you have to break down walls and figure out stuff. So that's just the nature of it. And here's what I was talking about. So this is the stages of developing this team. In the beginning, you have forming. And this is where you get in and you really don't know who's who and you're trying to figure out how we're going to operate. And I don't feel comfortable. I don't want people to think I'm a jerk, but I don't want to be a pushover. And, I'm feeling out all the other personalities on the team. So I really don't know what's going on. We're kind of just forming and figuring out stuff. Then you go to storming, where people start to kind of say their opinions a little bit more and more. And so as a result of that, there's conflict. And then you start to see that some people are wanting to be the leaders and some people are trying to establish themselves so they don't feel like they're going to be stepped on. And you see that it's a little less docile than the first stage. Then you go to norming. The roles are kind of established and people say, well, normally so-and-so does this and, they'll come through the door and they'll, put the meeting into order and, we're trying to figure out what's going on and we start to develop coordinated goals and we start to develop kind of our culture and our personality. Then we get to performing. We've got to figure it out. We're trying to coordinate things. We're developing trust among each other. People feel committed. They like being a part of the team. And we get things done. That's what we're really at. Performing. That's what we really want to do. So what we're after is a high performing team. And then once we're done, there's no more need for the team, that's when we get to adjourning. Now, one of the things that happens is just like we create mental models as individuals, we also create mental models as teams as well. And that describes us, that actually creates our personality, and it's the team identity that's created from a team mental model actually contributes to cohesiveness, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But the idea here is that those team mental models is what helps people to get comfortable with each other, and it also is what helps teams understand the efficiency of the they're developing a heritage of a routine, and they're really kind of figuring out their way, and there's a value to that, although some would argue that creativity might be trampled on just a little bit. Some would say that you really got to find your flow and find your rhythm and your groove, and that's what developing this mental model as a team could really help to do. So what we do in order to accelerate that is team building activity. So these are activities that you do to improve the team's development and functioning. And what do? You're trying to make sure that you're clarifying the goals. You're making sure that if there's problems that arise, that you're well equipped to be able to deal with that. You make sure that you're establishing those role definitions and making them clear to everybody, and it just improves overall relations. What happens when you do this is that you start to develop team norms. And team norms is basically, this is how we do things, right? And so team norms are good, but again, we need to understand that team norms have the potential to create bad habits. And then when you do that, you have a counterproductive norm, and that's not really what you want to do. So the idea here is that you want to develop healthy team norms. Team cohesion, the degree to which a team feels a unity with that group is the team cohesion. And the text talks about the fact that when you have a lot of people who are the same, or when your teams are small, or when you get together all the time, or you're maybe get together in other environments, when it's a very exclusive team, or when your teams rock, all of these things are things that contribute to team cohesion. And what we're really saying is we're tight. We're a tight team. We get each other. We really all get along. We really have a tight mission. We do well at what our job is. And that's a good thing. You want to have team cohesion. The challenge is sometimes in order to get the resources out of people, the resources and the diversity that you need other people. And so that kind of splinters team cohesion. And that's why you got to work on team bonding things so that you can do all of those things that we talked about. So high cohesion teams perform better. That's really the main point here. When you have a cohesive team, they perform better for all of these reasons, right? They're motivated to maintain membership. They don't want to be kicked out. Because you're cohesive, you are sharing information all the time. All the members like being there. You feel like you have a good support team. And because you're cohesive, if there's any kind of conflict, you have the natural skills to develop them better. What are some things that you have to kind of think about when you are dealing with cohesion and performance? Well, first of all, task interdependence. Cohesion actually motivates people to get along and interact with each other. So that's a good thing. So task interdependence is improved upon whenever you have good team cohesion. Team norms consistent with organizational objectives. Cohesion motivates conformity to team norms. When you're trying to be a team or you're trying to develop that norm, cohesion helps. And also cohesion helps when you have lower performing teams, especially if those norms are in opposition to what the company is actually trying to do. Team cohesion, and this could go both ways. This could be a deal where it's like, well, our norms stand out from the team, and so we have to do something to improve that. But it also could be if you're an informal group or you are a team that's trying to stand out against somebody, perhaps high cohesion is better, especially I'm thinking about unions and things like that, where you have high cohesion because things are going to get testy and you're going to need everybody to be on the same board. And it could be really kind of dangerous. Let's talk about trust. Trust is very important as we build these teams. And so the text talks about 3 levels of trust. Calculus-based trust is basically the lowest level. This is the deal where you have a team that trusts each other because they all understand the rules and they know that we say this person isn't going to do that because they know what's going to go on, and if they don't perform the way that they're supposed to perform, or if they don't do what they're supposed to do, then they're going to face sanctions, or we're going to kick them out, or they're going to have fines, or whatever it is. So this is basically like, how is it that you as a team member arrive at this feeling that you know that other people are going to do what they're supposed to do? The lowest level is, well, if you don't, then you're going to have some fines. Then you have another higher level, which is knowledge-based trust, which is kind of what you can expect as a result of the habitual thing of getting, your deal as well. I just know that everybody's going to do the right thing, and, they typically do the right thing, and things are going well, so I feel like things are going to happen. The highest level is identification-based trust, this is where you really have this teammate that you can count on. Those trust-building deals where you fall backwards and let people catch you. This is where you're going to be caught, right? Your deal is, I can trust my teammates because we are a tight unit and we think the same, we're on the same level, and that's the way it is. And that's a high level of trust. Now let's talk about some teams that may not necessarily be as responsible to the higher organization. So we talk about self-directed teams. Self-directed teams are usually cross-functional groups that come from different areas inside of the organization. They're usually organized around work processes, and they complete an entire piece of work requiring several interdependent tasks. And they usually because of the nature of what they have going on, they're usually pretty autonomous over all of the task decisions. The thing to understand is that in order to be successful, you got to be responsible for the entire process. If you're a self-directed team, the team has to be responsible throughout the entire task. There has to be high interdependence, so you have to know that everybody can depend upon each other. You have to not depend upon other teams, so you have to have low interdependence with other teams. You have to have the autonomy to actually get the work done, and then you have to have all of the support that you need. Sometimes you're not able to be there with your team members, and so you have virtual teams. And so virtual teams are when team members are not in the same place, and so they still have to get some tasks done, and you use all of this IT stuff in order to link people together. And in order to be successful, the people have to be good virtual team members. You also have to have great communication skills and technology to communicate each other. The structures need to be high task structure, or the tasks need to be high task structured task. And then every once in a while, you have to have the ability to meet face to face. If you have that ability, then it's easier for you to do that. So when we're talking about team decision making, there are some things that get in the way. First of all, we have time constraints. That's with every decision, right? It becomes more complex when we're talking about people, because now we have to coordinate schedules. We have to, there's task interdependence, so we have to figure out how people interrelate with each other, and that just kind of creates inefficiency. There's also evaluation apprehension, the reluctance to mention ideas that seem silly because you feel like people are going to tease you, or that you feel like people are going to think you're dumb, or that's whatever it is. That's that thing that comes into play when we want to, the self-enhancement factor. And perhaps when we're with a team, we don't want to say things because we feel like people are going to not like that idea, or they're going to think we're silly or something like that. Also, the pressure to conform. How many times have you been in a room where someone asks a question, 90% of the room raises their hand, and so you don't want to be the only one? How many times have you said, well, I didn't want to be the only one who, whatever that is? That is pressure to conform. You're wanting to be in that circle. And so, you don't necessarily stand on a point. How many times have you been on a team? You're like, well, everyone was going with it. I didn't want to say anything, but you recognize later that perhaps you should have. Also, there's overconfidence, inflated team efficacy. We think that we can do this, and so we're just going to make the decision, and you, because you have a benevolent view of your team, you think that first decision is the right decision. And remember all of those things that we talked about with the decision-making process as well, rational choice model, all of those things that come into play. We have this model, and we didn't really think rationally, and we weren't objective the whole time. That the propensity to stray away from the rational choice model increases when you have more people with different points of view. So what are some guidelines for good team decisions? First of all, team norms should encourage critical thinking. Don't just make it to where it's a vote and everybody has to agree. You should give everybody the opportunity to actually think critically about stuff, and to evaluate, and to feel free enough to have a critical view of things. You should have sufficient team diversity. Diversity means that you're going to have a diversity of thought, and that's going to kind of jumpstart that innovation and those ideas. A checks and balances system to avoid one person dominating, or a couple of people dominating. You don't want personalities to take over, and now there are members of the team who feel like they don't have a voice. You should have the right size, and also you should have effective team structures, and that all depends upon the nature of the task and the goals that you're actually after. So when we're talking about brainstorming, brainstorming is great. You're getting together for the purpose of having some goals. So when we're talking about brainstorming, here's what we have to do. We have to understand that, first of all, there is no such thing as a silly idea, and we want as many things as we can get, as many potential ideas that we can get. So here are some brainstorming rules that can help to come up with some innovation. Number one, people should be able to speak freely. So you should say what's on your mind without fear that it's going to be judged, but also you need to, in order to do that, people need to commit to not criticizing. So it's really about giving, those first two are really about creating an environment where people feel free to share. Provide as many ideas as possible. It's okay to just throw ideas out there. You write them down because they could spark something and it's important. And what it really does is it provides the opportunity to build upon ideas. Okay. Oh, yeah. This says brainstorming is dismissed by lab research, but supported in field research and by leading creative firms. So a lot of times when you are, clinical research, your deal is everything is a step-by-step process. And if you're trying to create, if you're trying to spark creativity, brainstorming is great. What are the limits? Production blocking and, fixation on the conformity effect where you have an entire team group thinking and thinking about one little thing. We'll talk about those things a little bit later. So brainwriting is another idea. Brainwriting is where you kind of brainstorm, but you're not talking. You're brainstorming all by using written format. And these are just variations of brainwriting, right? So you can brainwrite electronically using computer technology. You can use the nominal group technique where you basically describe the problem, people write down their solutions, and then you share, and people just start to describe those solutions. No one's looking at anything. No one's talking about it. You just share what that solution is. Then you vote and see where we are. The deal is that's a way of getting ideas down without getting fixated on things, and it can be a great way. The problem is you do have some production blocking where you're trying to do things, and when you're trying to sort out ideas, you're actually not, while you're doing this stuff and trying to brainstorm and sort out ideas, you're not actually creating anything or moving forward. So that's something to take into consideration.